Dr. Amara Richardson stands at the peak of her profession, a celebrated cardiac surgeon, the first black woman to lead the cardiology department at Metropolitan Hospital, with a penthouse overlooking the city and a life meticulously built on her own terms. She has erased the poverty of her childhood, the shame of abandonment, the memory of a father who vanished before she was old enough to understand why. On what seems like an ordinary Tuesday morning, Amara enters examination room 4 for her first patient of the day. The man sitting on the exam table is older, weathered, his breathing shallow. His chart reads, Marcus Richardson, 67, presenting with irregular heartbeat and chest pain. The name hits her like a closed fist. It cannot be. It is. As Amara's professional mask begins to crack, she is forced to confront the man she spent 3 decades learning to hate. He doesn't recognize her at first. She has become someone far removed from the scared girl he left behind. But as the hours unfold, the truth emerges. Marcus never left willingly. He has been fighting to survive on the streets for decades, carrying guilt, illness, and the desperate hope that one day he might see his daughter again. Between the hospital's sterile corridors and the raw vulnerability of a medical crisis, Amara must choose between the woman she built herself to be and the daughter she was born to become. This is a story about the wall we build to protect ourselves from pain, and the only door that can bring us home, forgiveness. Mandatory opening. That day began like any other, until one act of kindness changed everything. What started as a routine patient appointment became a story that would rewrite 2 lives forever. Before we begin, subscribe and turn on the bell. Here, we tell stories that prove compassion can rise from the most unexpected places. Chapter 1. The Woman She Built. The alarm on Amara's phone chimed at 5:47 a.m., 13 minutes before it was scheduled to sound. She had learned long ago that control began before the world did. The penthouse was silent, except for the hum of the city far below. Floor-to-ceiling windows framed Manhattan in grey light. The Hudson River, a thin silver thread between steel and stone. Amara stood under the rainfall showerhead, letting hot water cascade over her shoulders, and thought about nothing. This was her ritual, emptiness before precision. By 7:15 a.m., she was dressed in her white coat, her stethoscope looped precisely around her neck, her dark hair swept back in a bun so tight it pulled at her temples. In the mirror, she saw Dr. Amara Richardson. Not Amara, not the girl, just the doctor. That was safer. That was clean. Metropolitan Hospital's cardiology department existed in a kingdom of its own, hushed, urgent, and controlled. Amara moved through the hallways like she owned them, which, in the eyes of her staff, she did. She was 52 years old, had published 43 papers, had saved more lives than she could count. The hospital had named the new wing after her last year. Her photograph hung in the main lobby, smiling, certain, untouchable. "Dr. Richardson," her nurse Janet called out, handing her a chart. "First patient is ready in exam room 4, presenting with arrhythmia and chest pain, admits to homelessness for the past 18 months. This is his first hospital visit in over a decade." Amara scanned the intake form quickly. Age 67, no insurance. Previous cardiac history unclear. She had treated hundreds of patients like this, men broken by addiction, poverty, or simply the grinding weight of circumstance. She felt nothing for them, or rather, she felt something clinical, a professional obligation to repair the machine, then send them back into the world. She knocked once on the exam room door and entered. The man on the table was skeletal, his skin the color of old paper. His breathing came in shallow gasps, and his hands trembled slightly as he tried to sit up straighter. His shirt was worn through at the elbows. His shoes, placed carefully on the floor, had holes. Amara's eyes moved to the chart one more time. Name, Marcus Richardson. The room tilted. For a moment, only a moment, she could not breathe. The world narrowed to the sound of the heart monitor, to the fluorescent lights overhead, to the impossible fact of the name written in black ink. "I'm Dr. Richardson," she heard herself say. Her voice was steady. Years of practice had taught her how to make her voice steady. "I understand you've been experiencing chest pain." The man looked up. His eyes were rheumy, clouded by cataracts or disease or exhaustion. They did not recognize her. Of course they did not. 34 years since she had seen this face, and he had aged into someone almost unrecognizable, gaunt where he had been solid, broken where he had been, if she was honest, already broken. "Yes, ma'am," he said quietly. "Started about 3 weeks ago, sharp, like someone squeezing." Amara moved through the examination with precision. She checked his heart rate, listened to his lungs, palpated his abdomen. Her hands did not shake. Her mind remained compartmentalized, the clinical part noting the irregular heartbeat, the enlarged heart, the telltale signs of years of untreated hypertension. The other part, the part she had spent her entire life burying, screaming. "I'll need to order some tests," she said, still professional, still distant. "EKG, blood work, possibly an echocardiogram." "Will I be okay?" he asked. There was something in his voice. Not fear exactly, but a kind of resigned acceptance, as if he had always known his body would fail him eventually. Amara did not answer immediately. She looked at him, really looked at him, for the first time since entering the room. "We'll know more after the tests," she said finally. As she turned to leave, he spoke again, his voice barely audible. "You have kind eyes," he said. "You probably hear that a lot." Amara left the room without responding. Chapter 2. The Ghost Made Flesh. In the hallway outside, Amara leaned against the wall for exactly 10 seconds. Her hand was still steady. Her breathing was controlled. In 10 seconds, she had compartmentalized the impossible, filed it away, locked it, buried it under years of surgical training and emotional discipline. By the time she reached her office, she had made a decision. She would not treat him. She would have another cardiologist assigned to Marcus Richardson's case. The name had been a coincidence. The resemblance, she had barely noted a resemblance. Memory was unreliable, especially when filtered through 34 years, and the lens of a man she had promised herself she would never think about again. But when she tried to work, the words on the chart in front of her, her own notes from a patient she had seen that morning, blurred into illegibility. Marcus Richardson, born March 14, 1957. Last known address, 542 Riverside Drive, apartment 3C, her childhood address. She had not thought of that apartment in decades. The narrow kitchen, the sound of him arguing with her mother, the small bedroom, where she had hidden under the blanket and wished herself into a different life, with a different father, with a different everything. Janet knocked on her open door. "The EKG results are back on your 4 o'clock. Want me to call him?" "No," Amara said too quickly, then more carefully. "I'll review them first." She pulled up the EKG on her computer. The results confirmed what she had suspected. Significant left ventricular hypertrophy, prolonged QT interval, the electrical misfiring of a heart pushed too long past its breaking point. It was a miracle he was still alive. Around 4 p.m., she found herself walking back to the ward where Marcus had been admitted. She told herself it was routine. She told herself it was professional. She told herself many things as she approached his room. He was sleeping, his body small and frail under the hospital blanket. Without the urgency of examination, without her defensive professionalism, she could see him differently. She could see beneath the weathering and the damage, the shadow of the man she remembered, the man who used to laugh, who used to hum in the shower, who used to be present before he stopped being present at all. When had that presence ended? She had always blamed him for leaving, but now, looking at the evidence of his life written in the degradation of his body, a terrible question formed. What if he had been trying to come back all these years, and she had simply never heard him knocking? She stood in the doorway for a long moment, then turned and walked away. Chapter 3. Breaking Point. That evening, Amara sat in her penthouse and did something she had not allowed herself to do in 3 decades. She remembered. She remembered being 6 years old, watching her father at the kitchen table, his head in his hands, while her mother screamed about money and failure and the broken promises of men who thought love could pay rent. She remembered being 9, hiding behind the couch while he packed a duffel bag, her mother's sobs echoing through the apartment like something alive. She remembered being 12, standing in front of her school's career day, saying with absolute certainty that she would become a doctor, not because she loved medicine, but because she wanted to fix things her father had broken. She wanted to save lives, because he had taken hers and shattered it. She had built her entire existence as a monument to his absence. Now, in the silence of her expensive apartment, with the city lights glittering below like a kingdom she had conquered, Amara felt the structure beginning to crack. She did not go home the next day. She went to the hospital early and found his chart. She read his history with clinical detachment and personal devastation. Marcus Richardson had been admitted to psychiatric care twice in his 30s, depression and substance abuse. He had been treated for a broken arm in 1998. Accident, he had claimed. His ex-girlfriend had said otherwise. He had spent time in shelters throughout the 2010s. For the past 5 years, his only medical interventions had been at emergency rooms, when his body could no longer sustain the punishment of street life. At the bottom of his file was a note, dated 3 years ago, from a social worker. Patient mentions having a daughter. Has not made contact with her in over 30 years. Patient believes daughter would not want to hear from him. Unlikely to pursue family connection, given estrangement and shame. Amara closed the file. That evening, at the end of her shift, she stood outside exam room 4 again. She knocked, waited for his voice, a weak "come in," and entered. He was sitting up now, looking slightly better with the IV fluids running through his arm. "Your tests came back," she said, pulling up a chair. She should have remained standing. Standing was professional, but she sat. "Bad?" he asked. "Significant," she said. "Your heart has been working far too hard for too long. Without intervention, you have maybe 2 years. With the right treatment, medication, possibly surgery, we might extend that." He nodded slowly, as if this was information he had already received from his own body. Day after day, year after year. "Will you be my doctor?" he asked suddenly. She should have said no. Every protocol, every instinct, every carefully constructed wall screamed that she should say no. "Yes," she said instead. "Comment where you're watching from. I want to see how far these stories of hope and redemption can travel." Chapter 4. The crack widens. Over the next week, Amara found reasons to check on Marcus more than protocol required. She told herself it was medical diligence. She knew it was something else entirely. She discovered things about him slowly, in fragments, the way you reconstruct a broken object by finding each piece. He had worked as a construction foreman for 15 years after leaving her mother. He had met someone, a woman named Catherine, and they had lived together for 12 years. She had died in 2008. He had never recovered from that death. The drinking had started after Catherine died, then the drugs, then the losing everything, then the streets. He spoke about these things without asking for sympathy. He spoke about them the way someone recites facts that no longer have the power to hurt, or perhaps they hurt so much that they had transcended pain and become simply the architecture of a life. "I used to think about you sometimes," he said one afternoon, during what was supposed to be a routine heart examination. "Wondered what you were doing, who you'd become. Your mother said you didn't want to hear from me, said you'd moved on, and that mentioning me would just dredge up old pain. Amara's hands stilled on the stethoscope. She said that? Not at first, Marcus said quietly. The first year I called the house. Your mother answered once. I heard you crying in the background. You were crying because I called. So I stopped calling. She was right. You were better off without me haunting you. Amara removed the stethoscope from her ears. My mother told me you didn't want to see me, that you'd started a new family and forgotten about us. The silence that followed was oceanic. I'm sorry, Marcus said finally, and the words seemed to come from somewhere beneath the floorboards of his body. I'm sorry for every year you believed that. I'm sorry for every year I believed it too. That night, Amara sat alone in her apartment and called her mother for the first time in 8 months. He's here, she said without preamble. He's my patient. He's sick. There was a long pause on the other end. When her mother spoke, her voice was small, older than Amara had ever heard it. Is he asking for forgiveness? Her mother asked. No, Amara said. He's not asking for anything. Another pause. Then maybe, her mother said slowly, it's not about what he's asking for. Chapter 5. The Weight of Recognition. Marcus developed an infection in his second week at the hospital. It was a common complication for someone in his condition, his immune system weakened by years of malnutrition and stress, his body too fragile for the ordinary battles it was forced to fight. The infection sent his fever spiking to 103, 6 degrees. His heart rate became erratic. For 2 days, it looked as though the damaged organ might simply decide to stop. Amara did not leave the hospital during those 2 days. She sat in the small office adjacent to his room, monitoring his vitals, adjusting his medications, willing his body to hold on through sheer force of professional will. On the 3rd night, when his fever finally broke and his heart rate stabilized, she allowed herself to fall asleep in the uncomfortable chair beside his bed. She woke to find him watching her. You stayed, he said. It's my job, she replied, the reflexive answer emerging before she could stop it. He shook his head slowly. No, it's not just your job. She did not contradict him. In the pale morning light filtering through the hospital window, there seemed to be no point in maintaining the fiction. Why didn't you want me to know who you were? She asked instead. When I first examined you, you didn't tell me you were my father. Would you have believed me? He asked. Or would you have thought I was trying to manipulate you, some homeless man trying to get better treatment by claiming connection to a doctor? You don't know me well enough to assume that. Yes, I do, he said. I know you because you're my daughter, and I can see it in the way you hold yourself so carefully, the way you don't let anyone close. I did that to you. I taught you that the world was something to protect yourself against, instead of something to trust. Amara stood up from the chair. She wanted to leave. She wanted to run. Instead, she found herself speaking. You left, she said, her voice flatter than she intended. You left, and I spent my entire life becoming someone who would never need you. I built walls so high that nothing could touch me. I became a surgeon so I could fix things, because I couldn't fix you. I became successful so that your failure wouldn't define me, and I did it all without you. I know, Marcus said, and his eyes filled with tears, not the theatrical tears of guilt or self-pity, but the quiet tears of someone who has finally understood the magnitude of the damage he caused. I know, and I'm proud of you. I'm so proud of you that it hurts to breathe, not because of the degrees or the hospital or the title. I'm proud because you survived. You survived me, and you built something beautiful anyway. Chapter 6. The bridge over the following weeks. Marcus's health stabilized enough for him to be discharged, though his prognosis remained grim. He would need ongoing treatment, medication he could not afford, a stable place to live that he did not have. Amara found herself making decisions that violated every boundary she had ever constructed. She arranged for his care at a long-term cardiac facility with sliding scale fees. She visited him there every Sunday, sitting with him for hours, not talking much, just being present in a way that felt both terrifying and necessary. He told her about Catherine, about how Catherine had laughed like wind chimes and had volunteered at a community garden and had believed that goodness was something you had to actively choose every single day. Amara told him about medical school, the impossible hours, the patience she had lost, the weight of holding other people's lives in your hands and sometimes, despite everything you do, still losing them anyway. They did not speak directly about the abandonment, the lies they had both been told, the childhood she had spent angry at a ghost. Instead, they spoke around it, through it, gradually building something that resembled understanding. One Sunday, Marcus said to her, "I never stopped being your father. I just stopped being able to be the kind of father you deserved." And Amara, who had spent 34 years believing that his absence meant she was unworthy of love, finally allowed herself to hear what he was saying. It was not about her. It had never been about her. He had been drowning, and drowning people sometimes let go of the hands reaching for them, not because the hands aren't worth holding, but because the drowning person thinks they're not worth saving. If this story already touched your heart, hit the like button. It helps Amara's message reach more people who still believe in kindness. Chapter 7. The education Amara began bringing her father things, not charity, she insisted when he tried to refuse, but companionship. She brought him books because he had always loved reading. She brought him photographs from her apartment, carefully curated images of the life she had built. She brought him her time, which was the most valuable thing she had. One afternoon, she brought him the old photograph from her childhood, the one of them together, taken when she was 5 and he was still present, still believing that love could be enough to hold a family together. He looked at the photograph for a long time, holding it with the tenderness of someone touching something sacred. "Do you remember this day?" he asked. "A little," Amara said. "I remember being happy. You were," he said. "You were so happy, and I swear to you." He looked up at her with the intensity of someone bearing witness to something that mattered. "I swear to you that I would do anything to give you more days like that. I would rewrite my entire life if I could." "I know," Amara said, and she realized that she did know. Not because he had said it, but because she could finally see him, not as the father who had failed her, but as the man who had been failed by his own brokenness, his own inability to be strong in the ways that mattered. She made a decision that surprised everyone who knew her. She took a leave of absence from the hospital. It was supposed to be 4 weeks. It stretched into 12. She arranged for Marcus to move out of the facility and into a care apartment not far from her own. She hired a home health nurse to check on him daily. She set up his medications, arranged his follow-up appointments, and spent her days doing something she had never allowed herself to do. She grieved. She grieved the father she should have had. She grieved the life they might have shared. She grieved all the years she had spent building walls instead of bridges, storing anger instead of love. But gradually, as spring moved into summer, something shifted. The grief transformed into something gentler, into acceptance, into forgiveness, not for what he had done or failed to do, but for both of them for being human and broken and doing the best they could with what they had. Chapter 8. The teaching one evening, while they were sitting on the small balcony of his care apartment, watching the city light up as dusk turned to night, Marcus said something that changed how Amara understood her own life. "You know what I'm most afraid of?" he asked. "It's not dying. It's that you'll spend so much time trying to heal me that you forget to heal yourself." "I'm fine," Amara said automatically. "No, you're not," he replied gently. "You're brilliant and successful and lonely. You've built a life so carefully structured that there's no room for anyone to love you the way you deserve to be loved. And that's my fault. Or rather, it's what I caused in you, and I'm sorry for that in a way that no apology can fix." "So what am I supposed to do?" Amara asked. "Undo 34 years of protection?" "No," Marcus said. "I'm saying that the walls you built to survive me were necessary. They were smart. They kept you alive, but you don't need them anymore, and maybe it's time to let someone in." Later, after she had left his apartment and returned to her own, Amara stood at her window, the same window where she had stood so many mornings, looking out at a world she had conquered but never learned how to inhabit. She thought about her father's words, and she realized that she did not know how to let anyone in. She had built her entire professional identity on being the healer, not the healed. She had structured her personal life to require nothing from anyone. For the first time in decades, this terrified her, and for the first time in decades, she was willing to be terrified. Chapter 9. The Redemption. Marcus Richardson died on a Wednesday morning in late July with his daughter holding his hand. He had known it was coming. The medication had stopped working weeks ago, and his heart, that damaged and determined organ that had carried him through so much, was simply too tired to continue. In his final days, he had been at peace in a way Amara had not expected. He spoke about Catherine, about the work he was proud of, about the daughter who had exceeded any dream he might have held for her. "Don't be sad," he told Amara the night before he died. "Not because I don't deserve sadness, but because I got something I didn't think I was allowed to have. I got to see who you became. I got to apologize. I got to tell you that I loved you, and I got to have you believe me." When his heart finally stopped, Amara was ready. She had learned to let go. She had learned that loving someone meant sometimes having to release them. The funeral was small. Amara's mother came, and the two women stood together in a way they had not in decades, finally able to grieve the man they had both loved and both blamed, finally able to see him as neither villain nor hero, but simply as a broken human being who had done his best with broken tools. After it was over, after the flowers had been arranged and the words had been said, and the city had returned to its ordinary chaos, Amara made another choice. She returned to the hospital, but she returned changed. She became known not just for her surgical skill, which remained extraordinary, but for her compassion. She established a clinic for uninsured cardiac patients. She mentored young doctors, particularly those from backgrounds like hers, teaching them that excellence and empathy were not contradictory, but complementary. And slowly, carefully, she learned how to let people into the fortress she had built. She learned that vulnerability was not weakness. She learned that love, messy, imperfect, human love, was worth the risk of breaking. 1 year after Marcus died, Amara stood in the small chapel at the hospital and listened as one of her mentees, a young black woman from a neighborhood not unlike the one Amara had grown up in, gave a presentation on the new cardiac care initiative. She thought of her father, and she finally understood he had not failed to give her anything. He had given her the strength to survive him, and in surviving him, she had learned how to save others. Subscribe for more stories of compassion, courage, and second chances. Thank you for watching Black Woman Doctor Became Rich, but met her lost father as her first patient. And remember, one act of kindness can rewrite a destiny. Epilogue. In the end, redemption was not about erasing the past. It was about finally learning to carry it without letting it carry you.